Continuing with Ready Player One, the other category I wanted to say, cinematography. When I say cinematography, or when I say this movie combines animation with live action, I don't mean films like Bedknobs and Broomsticks and Mary Poppins. I'm talking about the different universes. I often like to think of this film as somewhat inspired by James Cameron's Avatar, because if you watch Pandora, that's a lot of computer-generated imagery, but it's also motion capture. I'm sure a lot of you people watch motion capture behind the scenes. Motion capture is when you wear these suits. So at the same time, you're not only recording your voice, you're also acting while wearing like this suit with dots all over your body, and we take that motion and then we put an animation to it. Almost like A Scanner Darkly. The only thing about A Scanner Darkly is that A Scanner Darkly was more live action compared to animation. With A Scanner Darkly, they just shot it with no motion capture. They just kind of drew added like a drawing over top of it with computers, like a computer generated drawing over top of the live action. This one, I gotta say, the computer animation for this one is unbelievable. It's not like Toy Story. I mean, we've seen Steven Spielberg direct animated movies like The Adventures of Tintin. This one, he combines both live action and that animation. A lot of times I kept on forgetting that they were not in a real world when they were in the Oasis and that it was virtual. It's one of those things where you say it's easy to forget that they're not in a real world, and it's easy to forget that this isn't the other side of the story. There's also a story in the real world. The movie oftentimes shifts back and forth between the real world and the Oasis. A lot of people don't really like that. I know my aunt doesn't really like that idea, but the idea of switching things back and forth, it's kind of confusing at times. In this movie, you really have to watch. You really have to pay attention. But as for the cinematography, let's get back to cinematography. It wasn't like Saving Private Ryan, where it was both handheld and still cameras. A lot of times you could actually had still cameras. You could tell that there were still cameras. There may have been some handheld cameras, and maybe I just didn't notice it or didn't catch on that, but I know that possibly they used handhelds for the end battle scene for Ready Player One. Also, another thing about the animation is that it was like something out of this world. Like, this is something, to me, it's the movie saying, get ready for the 2020s, this is the new decade, this is how we're going to film things, this is what cinematography is going to look like for animated films. And I think that's what I like about this film, was that the animation in the Oasis was just convincing. It was like a real video game movie. If this was an original video game plot, I would say this is probably the best video game adaptation I've ever seen. If only this was a video game people would play. Not the Oasis, but the idea, Ready Player One. The animation, that's what I wanted to catch on, was that it kind of looked like a video game. Well, even though it was a video game movie, this wasn't an original idea from a game of any sort. It was an idea from a book. Overall, I thought that the cinematography was original. It was mesmerizing. The most mesmerizing cinematography I've ever seen. Stay tuned for my next categories. This upcoming one is one that I'm excited to tell you. Easter eggs and additional improvements. Like, when I say additional improvements, I mean like things that could have been added in, and it would have made things a little bit better for the original film. Not saying that it's a bad movie. It's awesome. Ready Player One. It's the best movie of 2018, and I think it's one of the best films ever made by Steven Spielberg. Stay tuned and I'll tell you what I mean.